My daughter-in-law buried me with 7 words. You have a week to get out. They were closing my son's casket. I'm Grace, and I thought I knew what grief looked like. I thought I understood family, but standing there in my black dress, watching them lower my Daniel into the ground, I realized I didn't know anything at all. Because while I was saying goodbye to my only child, Olivia was already planning my funeral. The thing about shock is that it makes you notice strange details. Like how Olivia's phone kept buzzing during the eulogy with notifications that said, "Project complete," or how my wedding ring caught on the funeral program, and inside the margin, I found Daniel's childhood handwriting, "Mom's house equals safe house." He'd scribbled it there years ago, probably during some boring church service. I whispered to his casket, "I'll keep our promise, Danny." The promise I'd made when he was 7, and afraid of monsters under his bed. I told him our house would always be his safe place, no matter what. But as I looked around at the 7 relatives who wouldn't meet my eyes, I wondered if they already knew something I didn't. That envelope in my coat pocket suddenly felt heavier than grief itself. The first crack appeared 3 days after the funeral. I came home to find Olivia measuring my living room with a tape measure, taking notes, and photographing everything with her phone. "For insurance purposes," she said, not looking up. "Daniel would want me to take care of these details. But insurance companies don't need to know the exact width of your grandmother's china cabinet. They don't need photos of your bedroom doorknob taken from 6 different angles. And they certainly don't need measurements of your backyard rose garden." Carol, my neighbor of 20 years, brought over a casserole that evening. She'd been my anchor through everything. The one person who seemed to understand that losing Daniel felt like losing myself. "Honey," she said, settling into Daniel's favorite chair, "you need to think about your future. This house is so big for just one person." Even Carol was asking strange questions. Did I have backup plans? Had I updated my will recently? Did I know where all my important documents were kept? I started noticing things. How Olivia's constant phone calls were conducted in Spanish, a language I didn't understand. How she'd replaced our family photos with stock images of strangers in the same frames. How my bedroom door handle had been deliberately loosened, making me stumble every time I entered. "Mom Grace," Olivia said one evening, using the name that had once felt warm, but now sounded calculated. "I've been thinking about Daniel's wishes. He told me he wanted you to have freedom in your golden years. To travel. To not be tied down by this big house." She pulled out a worn piece of paper. "I found this in his things. He wrote it for you." The note was in Daniel's handwriting, but something felt wrong. The words were right, but they were too neat, too perfect. My son had terrible handwriting, had since childhood. Yet this note looked like it had been practiced over and over again. I held the paper to the light and saw something that made my heart stop. Faint impressions of different words underneath, as if someone had traced over them repeatedly. Someone had been practicing my son's handwriting. That night, I couldn't sleep. Have you ever had your own family doubt your place in it? Because I was starting to realize that doubt was about to become my greatest weapon. The betrayal came wrapped in kindness, the way the worst ones always do. Olivia organized an estate sale to help with funeral expenses. She presented me with a stack of papers to sign, each one labeled with caring titles. Grief Support Documentation, Memorial Fund Authorization, Transitional Living Agreement. "It's just paperwork, Mom Grace," she said, her voice soft with manufactured sympathy. Daniel would want everything handled properly. But I'd spent 30 years as an insurance investigator before retirement. I knew the weight of documents, the danger of signatures given in sorrow. So I put on my reading glasses and actually looked at what I was signing. The first document wasn't about grief support. It was a property transfer agreement. The second wasn't about memorial funds. It was a declaration of mental incompetence. The third wasn't about transitional living. It was a complete surrender of my legal rights to my own home. I set down the pen and looked at this woman who'd been in my family for only 3 years. These aren't what you said they were. Oh, Mom Grace, you're confused. Grief can make us see things that aren't there. She reached for my hand with practiced concern. That's why Daniel wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of. He knew this day would come. That's when she played the recording. Daniel's voice filled the room. Mom deserves freedom. She shouldn't be tied to this house anymore. I want her to be able to let go and find peace. I stared at the small device in her hand. It was my son's voice, but something was wrong. The inflection was off, the pauses too perfect. In 30 years of investigating insurance fraud, I'd learned to recognize synthetic audio. But this was something newer, more sophisticated. Where did you record this? I asked. He called me the night before he died. He was worried about you, about the burden this house would become. But Daniel had been in the hospital that night, sedated for pain management. I'd been holding his hand. He couldn't have made any calls. I excused myself to the bathroom and called the hospital. The nurse remembered me, remembered that Daniel had been unconscious for his final 18 hours. No calls made, no visitors, except me. When I returned, I found Olivia going through my jewelry box, Daniel's childhood teddy bear tucked under her arm. He wanted you to have this, she said, holding out the bear. Something to remember him by. The bear still smelled like Daniel's cologne. But it was a cologne he'd only started wearing after meeting Olivia. Before that, he'd worn the same aftershave for years, the one his father had used. I hugged the bear and felt something crinkle inside. There was paper hidden in the stuffing, accessible through a small seam. Daniel's real handwriting, messy and familiar. Mom, if you're reading this, don't trust anyone. The house is yours. The papers are in the place where light hits best. I love you. My hand shook as I looked at Olivia, who was watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. Patient, calculating, predatory. I need some air, I said. Of course, Mom Grace, take your time. But the papers do need to be signed today. The estate sale is tomorrow. Outside, I called my son's real lawyer, the one who'd handled his father's will years ago. He'd never heard of any estate sale, any property transfer, any mental incompetence declaration. Mrs. Henderson, he said, his voice grave. Someone's been impersonating me. I received calls asking about your son's estate, but I told them I wasn't handling it. Someone else claimed to be his attorney. I hung up and realized I was holding my breath. The woman in my house wasn't just taking my home. She was taking my son's memory, his voice, his final wishes. She was erasing him and replacing him with a fiction that served her purposes. But she'd made one mistake. She thought grief made me weak. She was about to learn it made me dangerous. What would you do if someone tried to steal not just your home, but your child's memory? Because I was about to find out exactly what I was capable of. The next morning, I woke up to find my house keys missing and the locks changed. I stood on my own front porch in my bathrobe, holding one small suitcase, while Olivia watched from my living room window. She'd moved fast, efficiently, like she'd done this before. Carol appeared at my elbow. Oh, honey, come stay with me. This is all happening too fast. But even Carol's kindness felt different now. She was asking too many questions about where I'd put my important documents, whether I'd made copies of anything, if I had any backup plans. That's when I realized the extent of the betrayal. My phone had been hacked. For months, my calls and texts had been monitored. My family hadn't been ignoring me after Daniel's death. They'd never received my messages asking for help. I borrowed Carol's phone and called my sister in Phoenix. "Margaret, I've been calling you for weeks." "Grace, what are you talking about? I haven't heard from you since the funeral. I thought you wanted space." Every text I'd sent had been intercepted. Every call had been rerouted. I'd been systematically isolated, cut off from my support system while Olivia implemented her plan. But isolation works both ways. If she could monitor my communications, I could monitor hers. I remembered Daniel teaching me about cloud storage when he'd helped me back up my photos. "Mom, everything lives in the cloud now. Delete something on your phone. It might still exist somewhere else." That evening, while staying at Carol's, I accessed my old work laptop. 30 years of insurance fraud investigation had taught me a few things about digital forensics. I started looking for Olivia's digital footprint. What I found made my blood run cold. She had a YouTube channel called Inheritance Strategies, with over 50,000 subscribers. Her content was tutorials on how to obtain property from elderly relatives, how to create convincing documentation, how to isolate targets from their support systems. One video was titled, "Using Grief as a Weapon, a Case Study." It was my situation, described in detail, uploaded 2 weeks before Daniel's death. I watched this woman explain how she'd been conditioning her target for months, slowly introducing medications that caused confusion, gradually isolating her from family, practicing voice synthesis technology to create fake final messages. "The key," she told her subscribers, "is patience. You have to make them believe it's their idea to leave. Make them think they're being a burden. Make them grateful for the chance to sign everything away." The comments were horrifying. Dozens of people sharing their own stories of elder manipulation, congratulating Olivia on her business model, asking for specific advice on forging documents. But the most chilling part was the video's description. Subject preparation complete. Implementation begins post-funeral. Estimated timeline, 2 weeks to full property acquisition. She'd been planning this since before Daniel died. But that wasn't even the worst part. I found her earlier videos, going back 2 years. She'd done this before. 3 other elderly women in 3 different states. All had lost their homes. All had been declared mentally incompetent. All had disappeared from public records shortly after. I screenshot everything, downloaded every video, saved every comment. But I needed more than digital evidence. I needed proof that would hold up in court. That's when I remembered Daniel's safety deposit box. He'd given me the key years ago, hidden inside my late husband's old watch. I'd forgotten about it in my grief. But Daniel had always been careful about keeping important documents safe. The next morning, I went to the bank. The box contained copies of all my property deeds, Daniel's real will, and a letter in his handwriting. If you're reading this, it means something happened to me and someone's trying to take advantage of you. Fight back, Mom. You taught me to stand up to bullies. Now it's your turn. There was also a USB drive labeled, "For Mom's Protection." I plugged it into the bank's computer and found something that changed everything. Daniel had been suspicious of Olivia for months. He'd secretly recorded conversations, documented her strange behavior, even hired a private investigator to look into her background. She wasn't just a con artist. She was part of an organized network targeting elderly widows across the country. And Daniel had been gathering evidence to expose her when he died. His death might not have been natural after all. The private investigator Daniel had hired was named Marcus Chen, and he'd been waiting for my call. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm so sorry for your loss. Daniel was a good man who loved you very much. He paid me to continue investigating even after his death, if anything happened to him." We met at a coffee shop across town, where Marcus laid out a file that made my hands shake. "Your daughter-in-law's real name is Olivia Thornfield Martinez Collins. She's been married 4 times, and 2 of her previous husbands died under suspicious circumstances. She's part of a network that targets recently widowed women with adult children." The photographs showed Olivia with different hair colors, different names, different identification documents, but always the same predatory smile. "She's not working alone," Marcus continued. "Carol Weston, your neighbor, has been feeding her information about you for over a year. They split the profits from each property acquisition." My stomach dropped. Carol, who'd held me while I cried after Daniel's funeral. Carol, who'd brought me soup when I was sick. Carol, who'd been documenting my daily routines, my habits, my vulnerabilities. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Daniel contacted me 6 months ago. He said Olivia was asking strange questions about your health, your finances, your legal documents. He wanted to protect you, but he needed proof." Marcus handed me a recording device. "This contains 23 hours of conversations between Olivia and Carol planning your con. They didn't know Daniel had placed listening devices in your home." I put in the earphones and heard my own death being planned. "The old woman's tougher than expected," Olivia's voice said. "She's asking too many questions about the paperwork." "Give her more of the tea blend," Carol replied. "The herbal stuff with the mild sedative. She'll be more compliant." "What about the family?" "I've been intercepting her communications for months. They think she's shutting them out in her grief. By the time they realize something's wrong, she'll be in a care facility and we'll have power of attorney." "And if she fights back?" "She won't. The medication will make sure of that, and if it doesn't work fast enough, well, accidents happen to confused elderly people." I ripped off the earphones, nauseated. They'd been poisoning me, isolating me, planning to either institutionalize me or kill me. "There's more," Marcus said gently. "Daniel's death. The hospital found traces of a rare plant toxin in his system. Small amounts, not enough to kill him directly, but enough to worsen his condition and speed up his decline. She killed my son." "We think so, but proving it will be difficult. The toxin clears the system quickly, and it's been weeks since his death." I sat in silence, processing the magnitude of what I'd learned. My son had died protecting me, and I'd been too blind with grief to see the danger. "What do we do now?" I asked. "We set a trap. You're going to give them exactly what they want, but on your terms." Marcus explained the plan. I would appear to capitulate, agree to sign the property transfer documents, but with specific conditions that would expose their fraud. We'd record everything, document every lie, every forged signature, every illegal act. "But you need to understand," Marcus warned, "this is dangerous. If they realize you're onto them, they might accelerate their timeline. Carol has keys to her house where you're staying. You're not safe there." That night, I moved to a hotel under a false name. I spent hours listening to the recordings, learning the full scope of their operation. They had a network of accomplices, fake lawyers, corrupt bank officials, even a medical professional who would declare me incompetent if needed. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated a mother's love and an investigator's instincts. I called my sister Margaret and told her everything. For the first time in months, I heard genuine shock and outrage in someone's voice. "Grace, Why didn't you tell me sooner? I couldn't. They were blocking my communications. I'm flying out tomorrow, and I'm bringing Tom. My nephew Tom was a federal prosecutor who specialized in elder fraud cases. The game was about to change. But I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was going on the offensive, and I was going to win. The trap was set for Thursday morning. I called Olivia from the hotel, my voice trembling with manufactured defeat. I want to come home. I want to sign the papers and get this over with. Of course, Mom Grace. I knew you'd come to your senses. This is what Daniel would have wanted. I wore a wire, hidden in my grandmother's brooch. Marcus and Tom were positioned outside in unmarked cars. Margaret was at the police station, ready to call for backup if needed. Walking up to my own front door felt surreal. The house looked the same, but Olivia had already started moving in her own furniture, replacing my memories with her preferred aesthetic. Carol was there too, playing the part of the concerned neighbor. Grace, honey, I'm so glad you're doing this. It's really for the best. The papers were spread across my dining room table, the same table where Daniel had done his homework as a child. Olivia had prepared multiple copies, all with slightly different terms, trying to confuse me about what I was actually signing. Just a few signatures, Olivia said, her voice honey sweet. Then you can start your new life. I picked up the pen, then paused. I want to record a message for Daniel first, something to play at his grave. That's not necessary, Carol said quickly. Please. It would mean so much to me. I pulled out my phone and hit record. Daniel, my darling boy, I'm signing away our house today. The house where you took your first steps. Where you brought me breakfast in bed on Mother's Day. Where you told me about your dreams. Olivia shifted uncomfortably. She wanted me to sign the papers, not create a record of what was happening. I'm doing this because Olivia says it's what you wanted. She played me the recording of you saying I deserved freedom, that I shouldn't be tied to this house anymore. Mom Grace, let's just focus on the paperwork. But Daniel, I want you to know something. I found your real message. The one you hid in your teddy bear. The one that said not to trust anyone. The room went silent. Carol and Olivia exchanged glances. I also found your USB drive. And I listened to the recordings you made. I know about the private investigator. I know about the plant toxin. I know you died trying to protect me. Olivia lunged for my phone, but I was ready. I pressed send, live streaming to my Facebook account where Margaret was recording everything. You killed my son, I said, my voice steady now. You poisoned him slowly, then you tried to steal his memory and his legacy. You're confused, Grace. The grief medication. The medication you were giving me. The sedatives Carol was putting in my tea. I've been recording everything for weeks. I played a sample of their conversation, their voices filling the room as they planned my destruction. Carol bolted for the door, but Tom and Marcus were already there, badges out. Federal Bureau of Investigation. You're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Olivia tried a different approach. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Grace, please. I love Daniel. Everything I did was for him. You practiced his voice on YouTube tutorials. You forged his handwriting. You stole his final words and replaced them with lies. The federal agents read them their rights while I stood in my living room, surrounded by the remnants of my violated life. But I wasn't broken anymore. I was angry, and anger was so much stronger than grief. Ma'am, Tom said gently, we need you to come with us to give your full statement. We've been investigating this network for months, and your evidence is exactly what we needed." As they led Olivia away in handcuffs, she looked back at me with pure hatred. "You think you've won? You're just a bitter old woman who couldn't let go." "No," I said, my voice carrying the weight of 30 years of investigation experience and 68 years of living. "I'm a mother who kept her promise. The house was mine again. But more importantly, Daniel's memory was mine again. And I was going to make sure these predators never hurt another family. Have you ever had to fight for your own truth? Because sometimes the truth is the only weapon you have left." The federal investigation moved quickly once they had my evidence. Within 48 hours, agents had arrested 12 people across 6 states. The network was larger than anyone had imagined, with connections to corrupt officials, fake legal services, and even legitimate businesses that had been unknowingly facilitating elder fraud. But the biggest shock came when they arrested Dr. Patricia Vance, the physician who'd been treating Daniel in his final weeks. She was paid to administer the plant toxin. Agent Martinez explained during my debriefing. Small doses, mixed with legitimate medications. It wouldn't kill him directly, but it would accelerate his decline and make his death appear natural. I sat in the federal building, looking at photographs of my son's medical records, finally understanding the full scope of what had been done to us. The toxin comes from a plant called white snake root. Dr. Sarah Kim, the forensic pathologist, explained. In small doses, it causes confusion, weakness, and organ stress. In someone already fighting cancer, it would be virtually undetectable as a cause of death. "How long?" I asked. "Based on the timeline we've reconstructed, probably 6 months. They were poisoning him slowly, making him sicker than he needed to be, so he'd die sooner and you'd be more vulnerable." 6 months, while I was caring for my dying son, making him comfortable, holding his hand through treatments. Someone was secretly killing him. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. But it was clean rage, focused rage. The kind that demands justice instead of revenge. "What about the other victims?" I asked. Agent Martinez opened a thick file. 17 confirmed cases over the past 5 years. Olivia and her network targeted recently widowed women with property and minimal family support. They used the same playbook every time. Infiltrate the family, isolate the target, forge documents, and either force institutionalization or arrange accidents. "What happened to them?" 3 are in psychiatric facilities under false diagnoses. They're being released today. 4 died in what were ruled accidental deaths. 10 lost their homes, but are still alive. Your case is the first time we've been able to prosecute successfully. The media attention was overwhelming. My story made national news, and suddenly I was receiving calls from families across the country sharing similar experiences. "You've done something remarkable," Margaret told me as we sat in my reclaimed living room. "You've exposed a network that was destroying families and gotten justice for Daniel." But the real victory came 2 weeks later, in federal court. Olivia had tried to plea bargain, claiming she was just a small part of a larger operation. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the digital forensics, the financial records, the testimony from other victims. When the judge read the verdict, guilty on all counts, including murder in the first degree for Daniel's death, I felt something I hadn't felt since before my son got sick. Peace. Not happiness. Not satisfaction, but peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've honored someone's memory properly. "Mrs. Henderson," the judge said after sentencing, "I want you to know that your courage in pursuing this case has prevented countless other families from experiencing what you went through. Your son would be proud. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked me what I wanted to say to other families who might be experiencing similar situations. Trust your instincts, I told them. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone convince you that grief makes you incompetent. And remember that love doesn't end with death. Sometimes it just changes form. Carol received 12 years for her role in the conspiracy. Dr. Vance lost her medical license and received 15 years. The fake lawyers, the corrupt bank officials, the entire network was dismantled. But Olivia received life in prison without parole for Daniel's murder. As I walked away from the courthouse, I realized that my son's death had not been in vain. His investigation, his protection of me, had led to justice not just for him, but for 17 other families. He'd kept his promise to keep me safe, and I'd kept mine to fight for what was right. Sometimes the people we love most find ways to protect us even after they're gone. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give them is refusing to let their memory be stolen. 6 months later, I'm still in my home, but now it's not just my house. It's become something Daniel would have loved. I've turned his room into a resource center for elder fraud victims. The walls are covered with information about legal rights, warning signs, and emergency contacts. 3 days a week, I host support groups for families who've experienced similar betrayals. The dining room table where I almost signed away my life now serves lunch to women who are rebuilding their lives after being targeted by predators. We share stories, resources, and something precious that was almost stolen from all of us: hope. Margaret moved closer to help with the foundation I've started in Daniel's name. The Daniel Henderson Foundation has already helped 47 families retain their homes and prosecute elder fraud cases. I've received over 3,000 letters from families sharing their stories. The most meaningful ones come from adult children who've learned to recognize the warning signs of elder abuse and protected their parents. Yesterday, I got a call from a woman in Oregon whose daughter-in-law had been using identical tactics to the ones Olivia used on me. Because of our case, she knew what to look for, what evidence to gather, and how to protect herself. "You saved my life," she told me. "Your story gave me the courage to fight back." That envelope from Daniel's funeral? I finally opened it fully. Inside was a key to a safety deposit box I didn't know existed, containing documents that proved he'd been protecting me in ways I never knew. But the most precious thing was a letter. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't protect you in person anymore, but I left you everything you need to protect yourself. You taught me to be strong. Now be strong for both of us. Love, your son." Some betrayals leave scars that never fully heal. But scars can also be proof that you survived something that was meant to destroy you. If you've ever felt locked out of your own life, remember this: one quiet move, one piece of evidence, one moment of courage can unlock every door. Your truth is your power. What would you have done in my place? And more importantly, what will you do if this happens to you or someone you love? Share your story below. We're stronger together, and every story shared is another family protected. Justice isn't always fast, but it's always worth fighting for. And sometimes, the people we love most leave us exactly what we need to win.